Thanks, Troy. Yeah, and I think thank you for being willing to kind of share kind of your specific data, because I think that's and that might be where we start some of the Q&A too, is security and feeling comfortable in that space. But before we really dive in here too, and Ben, I know you have that microphone in the back of the room, which looks like a big square. And that is so it can fall on the ground, I suppose. I hear it can be like a beach ball thrown around, but that you can talk into that so everybody can hear the question is the point. So feel free to raise your hand here, and we'll get you called on. I'll get us kicked off here with just a couple. And Troy, again, I'm going to come back to you and say, how. I'd say one of the biggest questions I get about the on-farm reports is my data safe? And all these efforts, there's a lot of people calling for your data, right, and asking for your data. How do you feel about that, and what have you been told about, what you can do with it or what you can't?
In the time that I've dealt with it, I feel very comfortable that it's very secured. Do I always worried of a hack? I mean, it can happen at any time with anything. But hopefully there's better computer programmers than me that can say safe, But in general, I believe that your data is good and it's always been safe. I deal with other computer things at the office that I know we need to be safe on everything and know that information is secure at all times.
Yeah, and I think that, I will tell you, that's probably the number one question that I get about how it's going to be treated. And I know that's one of the reasons that our partner that we work with in SEC is very cognizant of as well. And so I want to assure you and talk about that a little bit and emphasize that, the power of it at the individual level is extremely important. And then when you add it all together, it just magnifies that impact. And Dallas, that's really where you come in. And I wanted to ask you specifically about something you mentioned. You mentioned, C-suites and conversations and questions that they might have. You didn't mention, unless I missed it, kind of shareholders maybe and pressures there. And that's, I feel like, something we don't hear as much about, but starting to hear more about. So, you got any examples of how that can play out?
Sure. In the larger context of shareholder resolutions, so companies, publicly traded companies, have shareholder meetings that come in, and as you might expect, there's lots of interest of what's taking place, doing their part to be environmentally friendly, labor laws, all of that. And so shareholder resolutions can easily get passed to force an organization or company to go. And so, one of the efforts we monitor very closely, is that, and with it taking place. Another aspect is what they call ESGs, the environmental, social, governance. You probably heard a little bit about that in the news. And so especially in the financial sectors, the BlackRocks, the Morgan Stanleys, the Wells Fargo, the major companies that are lending money to food service startups or retail or that, all are beginning to look at this. An environment is a very key element. What are you doing to help offset the impact that your organization or company may have on the environment? And even to the tune of having discounted point rates on their loans for companies having an overall environmentally plan in place to help demonstrate that we're doing reduction on it. And so it's very alive and real. It's very topical, as you might expect, relative speaking to what's taking place right now in the news and the policy. You saw this with the administration just making a significant announcement this past year in relationship to CO2 emissions and what's being done to reduce all of that. And as you might expect, the meat sector, agriculture, gets a black eye for that. It's talking continually about meat is bad, a lot of attack on the beef sector and all of it coming in. And so all of that the reason I'm bringing all of that up is just very relevant. So it's not just a specific activist group coming in and attacking one specific production practice. It's a very larger context of, that's outside the scope of the pork sector. It's much larger in general. A huge focus on the row crop sector right now, what's being done to reduce the utilization of nitrogen. So it's really important to be there, to have dialogue and discussions and monitor it, to see what's coming up and when and if necessary, to help offset those shareholder resolutions. But it is one of the things that's there. Oftentimes we don't talk a lot about it just because, we're not wanting to, publicly talk about our game plan relative speaking to that. But it's a serious issue that's in the discussions. And like I said, a shareholder resolution passed for a major organization or a company, you will, as a net result, see a company's transition that imparts back down on the supply chain and putting mandates or asking what are you doing and the traceability of what you're doing to this specific issue.
I'll come back with a quick follow-up and then go back to Troy. And so the follow-up is, so you mentioning pork and kind of the conversations. What about other proteins? Are they saying, well, you're behind beef here or dairy here? Are we ahead? Where are we in that, it's not a game, but in that pecking order?
It's like many things. It's, as I said, it's competitive turbulence. So we saw the beef sector, which come under attack early on, form their sustainability group. And then you saw that followed by the dairy sector. You've seen that followed by the poultry side of the equation, the broiler. All of which making these lofty goals. We're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by X. Pork took a different tact. And when we went underneath the task force, the joint task force between the Pork Board and the NPPC and the industry and the state organizations, that we were not going to just focus on greenhouse gas emissions. We were going to focus on a much larger. And I consider a ground-up swell versus the top-down. We didn't get as much publication about it because anytime someone makes an announcement like we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% in time frame, that gets a lot of news. But you don't hear them talking about what are the applications that are being done to deliver on that goal. And we're building from the opposite side of putting all this in place to help measure progress rather than having this stated kind of lofty, newsworthy side of the equation, which means we have to work harder because we have to be in there telling people about it and then delivering on the message of that process. But like I said, we've done the evaluation from dairy, beef, broiler sector, all of them, and I can safely say that we're meeting them on the interstate. We're going north and they're going south. They're trying to get involvement from their producer level, much so because the corporate entities have agreed to it, but they're having a difficulty getting the embracement at the what I call the slat level or the dirt level of getting it done. And so they're all working on it. I mean, from an agriculture initiative, we see in the row crop side of the equation, obviously a lot of activity, much of which is privatized, because data is critical. And so that's a way for companies to position themselves of why you should buy, our ingredients or fertilizer or whatever it may be. So we have a unique position, I think, especially in the realm of, and this is what really resonates well, this nutrient life cycle that pork has, we're positioned way better than any other species. When you think about it in the context of competition, I always want to have something that's difficult for competition to mimic. Where our pigs are raised is where the grain is raised. And so we have a unique position to utilize our manure in a way that helps to, enhance soil health, runoff, reduce fertilizer. All of those are a great asset for us, I think, long-term, that we're beginning to do a better job of telling that story in soil health, because that is a huge opportunity that, while others are striving to do that, because if you look especially in the broiler sector, they're not involved in where the grain sector is. So the application of their litter creates a huge challenge for them. Same in the dairy industry and the same in the beef.
So circular economy, that's your new term to describe the U.S. pork industry, okay, everybody? Sustainable, circular. Gotta use the terms that resonate with folks, right? And I know we have a question there in the back of the room, so go fire away.
Dallas, thank you for your many years of service to our industry. I appreciate it. I've known you for most of that, I guess. So in a few years, I'll be able to say that I knew the old Jeff, I guess. So the sustainability program here, kind of started out with We Care and is evolving into a sustainability report and so forth. Do you see that potentially evolving into the arena of carbon sequestration, which is a potential revenue opportunity, or is this going to continue to be about telling our story?
Oh, there's no question that's the evolution. As we see, if there's one thing I'm assured, if there's money to be made, people will step up and engage that. And that's the new thing now, of getting paid for these services in the offset of it. And yeah, I think, but it all comes first with having the data. But yeah, I think there's already work underway, and the possibility exists for monetizing that. I'm not for sure. I don't have a crystal ball of where that's going to end up at. But yeah, there's going to be offsets that occur for that. We already see that happening in certain other sectors. But I don't want to, again, we're focusing a lot on the carbon, or CO2 or whatever. But there are other social issues that are really important to us that I don't want to downplay. And, that especially as labor is a huge issue. The social things that are going on right now in regards to taking care of, what are you doing in your community, giving back, what are you doing taking care of your employees. Those are critical pillars that we established, and we're working to find ways to demonstrate that and put metrics to it. But those social values can be just as important at times as those environmental impacts or the animal welfare side, and especially in today's culture and society, because that is a huge issue that we're seeing more and more questions from companies about, of what's being done to take care of your employees, your labor situation, what are you doing in your environment to give back, to make a better community, so we focus a lot on animal welfare, rightfully so. We focus a lot on environment, rightfully so. But you cannot offset these other things that are ultimately going to be very important as well.
I think that's important to think about when you think about being prepared as an industry, right? Playing offense versus maybe playing defense at different times, and thinking that if animal welfare was the first spotlight and carbon and climate is now in the spotlight, is biodiversity next? Is it water quality? And in some cases, water quality might be the biggest spotlight now. But then is it all the social issues behind that, right? So the spotlight kind of can move around from time to time. The best way to approach it is to be prepared on all those fronts, because the best defense is a good offense, right? So, and I was going to add one more comment going back to the question about offsets, which is the insets question. And one of the things to just think about across all of this space, coming back again to the spotlight of the day on climate or carbon, is to think, as an industry, we've set a 40% reduction goal by 2030. And to make progress against that 40%, we have to keep that within the pork supply chain. And so if all of our efforts end up in an offset market that goes to another industry, that means, that we can't count it. And so that's going to be, it's still going to, offset markets provide value. And so I think that's an option too. But there are, it's an interesting thing to watch in the traditional offset markets and how new markets are approaching it and saying that they're only going to be involved in an insetting market versus an offset. So just a nuance that, again, is starting to evolve in this space as major food companies, for example, are realizing that if all the efforts in their Scope 3 agricultural supply chains are going to the airline industry, what's going to be left for them to be able to report on the product, your product, that they set in front of consumers? If we can't say that that has an improvement in water quality or greenhouse gas emissions because, the airlines get to claim that, what's left for us? So it's just something, I think just strategically to have in mind as we think about these opportunities and long-term opportunities or long-term plays on them all. We got Bill in the back. You have the microphone. Oh, you do. Okay.
Yeah, question for Troy. So if I go back to our farm and talk about this with my brother, he's going to say, well, how much time is it going to take? Can you spend a couple minutes, just in a practical sense, help us understand what this process looks like with SEC? What sort of stuff do you have to have ready ahead of time? How does that interface work? Help us understand that.
So when I went through the experience, I guess, not being aware of everything that was needed, I had a nice 10-minute, 15-minute conversation to start with Austin or Ann at that point. I says, well, I can give you the manure rates. I'll get you the farm. Because I did the manure plan, so I was able to grab the manure plan and email it to them and just start checking them off of a list. And probably within, probably 10-minute conversation to know what I needed. And they were really good at sending me an email of, here's your checklist. Start checking them off. And if I forgot something, she says, hey, I'm still missing this. Take me a few minutes. I had it on a computer, kicked it right to her. And then she says, well, you're done for the year, or so far until the results come back. Then came in the schedule and says, hey, we're going to be in the area. It's going to take 15, 20 minutes. When I did my own, I also did 7 other at the same time at the store that they got suckered in because I says, we're going to go in and you're going to do this no matter you like it or not because I want a bigger pool. So I ended up grabbing 3 sow units, 2 nurseries, and 2 finishers, plus myself. So we did, I'd bet you I did, not even an hour of time of doing that whole cluster. So it doesn't take a lot of time of going through the steps. Can I tell you that you need your manure plan? Yes. Can I tell you that if you have a consultant has it, they can send it way quick versus you scanning it and going from there. Soil samples, not needed because most of the data is in the manure plan. They want a map, digital map, and then it's questioned and like our terrain, is it this quarter? No, that's trees, or that's a water body of water. So they'll get on the phone and say, now I think this is the wrong field or something, and they'll help you describe the property right. So, like I said, it's a very simple concept.
So what'd you say in total? I think you mentioned a couple hours maybe?
I would say like the 8 that I did was an hour. So it's like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But then they came back and did another 45 minutes, sit down, understand your data so you can reuse your data that you have.
So Troy, what do you think is the biggest, you said you brought people along no matter if they liked it or not. What do you think the biggest thing is about not liking it, or what's the biggest hurdle?
I tell them that we need to tell a better story. I get tired of standing at a public hearing and get yelled at. I like to have a lot of information that I can say, hey, please leave me alone. The data's good. Leave me alone. But at the end of the day, the information should tell itself. Now, sustainability was just very naive at that time when the pilot came out. It's getting traction now. Guys are easy to say, well, should I do it? I said, yeah, you need to do it. Like you and I talked before, the climate grants, you got to have the baseline So I've got another 10 or 15 or 20 if I can get these guys to jump in. We're going to do some more. I know I grabbed 4 or 5 guys last year that they said, yeah, and I know I gave manure plans out that needed it to where it needed to go. So it is worth it, in my opinion. So
I promise I'm not paying Troy as to be the spokesperson, but we got Al up here in the front that has a question. Oh, there's the throw. I like
There you
that.
go. Actually, my time on Pork Board, I've been very impressed with your vision, your strategy, and the ability for you to apply for and acquire a USDA grant to help us study this. Share your vision a little bit of what research needs to be done yet, what questions need to be answered yet, and kind of where do we go from here?
Yeah, so what research questions that we need to answer so that we can kind of continue moving forward. So if we think about research, I think there's a ton that we still need to know, and we're going down the path of soil health research related specifically to manure application, and you're part of that effort as well. But that I hear a lot about that. Well, what specifically does manure do for X, Y, and Z, right? And to have a 5-year research project that can definitively answer that across 16 or maybe more even states now, will be much closer. And that will go to, those are the types of questions that we need to answer then within some of these scientific tools and models. I just right before this panel started, I was having a phone call, and we were talking about, and even yesterday too, talking about different tools. You put in the same information, you might get a little bit different outcome, right? They all do things a little bit different, which is frustrating to me. I the answer should be the answer, right? No matter what, but that's our job at both National Pork Board as well as our partner at NPPC, is to get the answers to those questions and then work to improve the tools that are there so that they are more accurate over time. And so I think that those questions will feed into the tools, because right now you think about a lot of these models, livestock is probably behind. A lot of practices that we do in barns are not really accounted for in many of these, especially greenhouse gas tools. And so, again, another effort that we've been on to improve by building and utilizing and investing checkoff dollars in the carbon footprint calculator, right? And this is a new space. Coming back again to greenhouse gas emissions, I'm just going to bug Dallas with that. Is that we have, it's still an evolving science, and I think that's the key. There are lots of questions to answer, and so to prioritize those is something that we utilize our producer task force and expert task force to do, to say what are the biggest questions we need to answer this year and next year, and then we can deploy those into making these tools better, which ultimately will tell your story more accurately and account for things that are not accounted for. For example, and then I'll stop, I promise. For example, in models that are utilized in things like an offset market, like we already talked about, everything you do in the barn related to that pig, feed efficiency, nutrition, all those things, not eligible, not accounted for, not thought about within those models, right? A lot in field. And so how can we provide the literature, the scientific research to make that able to go into that model and make that an eligible practice? And so working with genetics companies now to say, if you have a genetic improvement, let's try to build a pathway so that improvement can become an eligible practice, and a producer can actually recoup some of the costs of employing that new technology. So, we can go a million different directions with that, but that's one example of where we can make improvements over time through research.
Ashley, just real quick, I know you're about out of time here, And I don't know the demographics of a lot of the people in here, but I would guess there's a lot of people that are integrators, individual producers like me, and some that have done some programs. I started the program. Sorry, Troy, I didn't finish it. It was more than just an hour for me, it was my fault that I didn't follow up with the group. We've heard a lot here, though, about the who, what, when, where, and why, but anybody that's in this room that was in the keynote presentation 2 hours ago, there was 3 key points. It was how, and how. So my point to you, or Dallas, Ashley, would be, how do we as organizations or individual farms continue to comply and get more participation? And I know it's more than just turning the name in.
It starts there, though. It starts there with the name. Yeah, no, I think that is the question that, again, kind of going to my question to Troy. What's the biggest thing that we need to overcome? And I'll tell you, I hear it is time is the biggest thing that I hear. And so how can, I work with SEC and MPPC to provide a solution to that. And I think we're open to a lot of feedback there as well, because I think we have some ideas about how to do that to make sure that we can compensate for time effectively, to make it worth it, right? To me, what that says to me a lot of times is it's not worth my time to do it. It's not the immediate thing I need to do. And so how can we as an industry, make sure that we're making it worth somebody's time to provide this data? And part of that is awareness, right? To share these stories like Dallas told about in boardrooms, to say, if you can slide this paper over and your data can be part of that and can make a difference between preventing a really bad decision, do you think that's worth a few hours of your time? And I think so that kind of awareness is still a big piece of what we need to do, right? And then I think some way of making it more valuable. So we're constantly seeking out those, what would be valuable with this tool and this report, or how can we make it more valuable? So again, open to ideas and suggestions there as well. But Troy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the value there of how we portray it.
I guess I just thought it was a good idea. I had been grilled enough times at a public hearing that I said, I'm done. Time was not my issue. I didn't care. I knew I had all the data and I could do it. So I would wonder if consultants might help push it. Mm-hmm. The guys that do the manure plans, they have most of that data anyway. Yeah. They might be able to take the farmer step away from it, say, well, he does it. Let's get them helping. And I know other people that have written plans that I know they have sent manure plans in to take that step away from them, but it might be helpful. I don't know.